So I've been in the automotive industry for about 20 years. It started off at Ford Motor Company. I was there for close to 18 years in various positions in powertrain. And I did the rotation program called the Ford College Graduate Program, and then was a DRE in fuel systems, and did it as well as calibration, engine calibration, things of that nature, and moved around within the powertrain community. My first foray into electrification was with our plug-in hybrids, and that started in 2008. And so that's when we began developing a different type of fuel system architecture for plug-in hybrids that was referred to as NIRCOS, non-integrated refueling canister only systems. And so there was a lot of hurdles to overcome with that. And so that's where I began to really get introduced into the electrification and to overcome different challenges that came about because of the hurdles in trying to marry a conventional powertrain with a high voltage battery. From there, I moved to vehicle integration in Ford electrification. And then that's when I started to help develop it. At Ford, it was the Ford C-Max, where our first plug-in hybrid came about. And then I also worked on the 2012 Ford Focus, which was a BEV, back in 2012. And then I had various positions in between there as part of it was referred to as the Product Development Leadership Program. So I rotated around to various positions, but then fast forward to 2016, came back to the electrification group, saw that was where the future was going to be, where the future investment was going to be. And so I was the supervisor for the electrification group for commercial vehicles, and that's where we saw a lot of the value proposition similar to Workhorse sees. And so I see a lot of commonality with that and a lot of opportunity. I then switched in my current role as the high voltage battery pack manager at LG Chem. And LG Chem, it's a supply, it's a tier one supplier, and so there was a lot more opportunity to define engineering principles and processes. And so that's what I've been working on for the past year. I've been working on an FCA program, and we just about achieved PPAP. So it's really good news with that, and a really good experience. Right off the bat, I am a person who likes to lead by example, work hard, have a strong sense of ownership, and I expect that of all of my staff to have a strong sense of ownership and to be conscientious. To give you an example, when I first came to, it was the FCA program called the GSW, which was a plug-in hybrid program. There were a lot of improvements that were required from an engineering standpoint in doing change control and releasing properly in APQP fashion. And it simply was not done for the first year and a half, to be frank. And so in identifying that, I had to come up with processes. I worked a lot with managers to come up with processes, etc. And so once those were implemented, I went through and did the first several releases, facilitating those discussions and leading how the engineering changes would go about, and have discussions with the validation groups to see what sort of validation requirements were necessary, and then taking that through senior management for approval. And so once I did that, leading by example, then I had a lead engineer follow me, and I just followed that person closely to make sure that they were trained well. And so that is my management style. I guess the most important thing is to have a strong open issues deck of different items and the different priorities for the tasks. And so typically I rank them low, medium, and high priorities. And then I also like to have when is the next due date? When does a report out need to be provided? And then additionally, I do use some of the different Microsoft products, such as Microsoft Teams, of course, Office, and use my calendar, and then link that with my phone. And then I also use Microsoft OneNote, and basically anything and everything that I can do in terms of calendars, in terms of having repeat meeting series, just ensuring that accountability is provided and given. Undoubtedly been the plug-in hybrid for an FCA for GSW. I inherited the program back in August of 2019, so just about a little bit over 6 months ago, 8 months ago. And when I came to realize that the design and release engineering group and the manager I was replacing did not have any engineering processes and did not have a release process. And so there were a lot of improvements that were required. So that was the context that I came into the program and realized that there were changes that were happening without proper approval, without APQP processes, and so there was quite a lot of improvement that was required. So the actions that I took was to ensure that we'll first lead by example for what was required, come up with processes, and came up with a simple 4-box process to ensure that FCA was aware of the changes or the engineering change requests, if you will. That FCA, our customer, was aware of what was happening. Once we received approval with that, review that with the senior management at LG Chem. And then as we work through the change and the release, coordinate at different touch points with the customer to ensure that the content was the same. But it was quite a feat to have to overcome that because of the mismanagement of the program initially. The engineers themselves, the DREs, who are a young group, very smart people, but young and a bit misguided from the previous manager that I replaced, had to be retaught how to do things, or how to be taught first time through how to do things. And so it was something that I led by example, and then had to right size the staff, trying different senior lead DREs until one fit. And I had to have a lot of challenging discussions, honest, challenging discussions with people, to let them know what my expectations were, to have them try to be as conscientious as me and follow my example. And so I had to replace that lead engineer over 3 times. I did have to remove some people and had to shift personnel around. So I would say it took about 2.5, 3 months to get the team right and to get the processes correct, and then also to satisfy LG Chem headquarters as well as FCA. But the outcome and the result is that we are about to achieve PPAP. Based on the description that has been provided to me, it sounds like I will have a good amount of autonomy and autonomy to define processes, potentially, of vision, and just based on the answer that I provided for a difficult engineering accomplishment with the FCA GSW program, that's something that I think I would be able to contribute to workforces, a strong leadership, conscientiousness, and a sense of ownership, and to lead by example. And so my plan is to come and have a look to see what processes do exist, what works well, and then if something is missing, I would be able to implement APQP standards and processes and disclosures to ensure that we have a strong change review board and proper engineering management. As well, I will be able to bring about, just based on my experience with electrification and my familiarity and understanding the value proposition with commercial vehicles, and my experience with Ford in taking the Transit Connect, which is a small gasoline vehicle that myself and my team we converted to an electrified vehicle, and to find opportunities and to find the best way to bring about that product with the lowest investment cost. And so with all of that, I think that those would be some of the strengths that I would bring to workforce, as well, because I have 20 years of experience with Ford Motor Company, and I was part of the leadership program, or the leadership rotational program, the PDLP. I would bring about a lot. What I would bring or offer to the workforce director of engineering is a lot of experience with Ford and with APQP, and what is expected of that, the different exposures that I've had, both from an engineering perspective and from a management perspective. Also, just through the years, over a decade of management, I do appreciate mentoring young engineers, and but I also have experience with senior engineers and veteran engineers. And I think that the word that I use for leadership with an array of folks is empathy, and I would bring that empathy into that leadership style. And so I look forward to that opportunity. So in terms of my proficiency of CAD software, I am familiar with using Digital Buck. At Ford, it was Team Center Engineering. And so I know how to do the fundamental basics with that to pull in a digital buck into a session. And then what Ford used was CATIA version 5. I'm less familiar with how to do the actual mouse clicks on that. My training back when I went to Wayne State for engineering was with ideas. I think there's a lot of similarities with those CAD packages. And so I am familiar with, knowing how to rotate a 3D CAD or cut sections, take measurements, and then look for interferences. So that's my familiarity and my experience with 3D CAD. Great question. It's with my close to 17, 18 years experience at Ford in powertrain, and then eventually ending in electrification and being a supervisor and then a manager in electrification at Ford, particularly with commercial vehicles. I see the business value, and I understand where workforce is coming from and the value proposition it offers. I also bring about a strong management style that understands engineering principles and understands the importance of engineering processes and discipline, and making sure that there's a robust release process and ensuring that there's good disclosure and proper disclosure, not only to our customers, but also to our management. I have an MBA in addition to having a master's degree in engineering from Wayne State, I have an MBA from the University of Michigan. And so I bring a good, solid management style with me. And I empathize with employees. I appreciate a diversity of employees, whether they're young and require a bit more mentorship and maybe closer monitoring, or if they're senior and they require much less direction. So that is something that I would bring to the table. So yeah, my years at Ford, my experiences and the challenges that I have overcome, my familiarity with electrification and commercial vehicles, my appreciation for that, and I believe that to be a very strong value proposition moving in the future. These are the reasons why I think I would be a good hire. I have been on a number of programs. I was the lead fuel systems DRE for the 2009 Ford Escape, and I saw that from concept going through design freeze and then going into mass production. So I did that for the 09 and 010 Escape, Ford Escape. I worked on the Ford Mustang in 2005, and I was the fuel system development engineer on that. I was for the 2015 Lincoln MKZ. I was the program manager on that program, and that was a black label program. So it was primarily just body exterior and body interior changes, but taking the team through design to prototype to the design studio, and then to launch down in Hermosillo, Mexico. Um, I also did the first fusion back in 2000 and the 2006 fusion. And so I did that as a Ford College graduate. I was a powertrain launch engineer, um, and I tracked Ames issues and ensured that the different powertrain functions understood what issues were happening and ensuring that we had good issue disposition. I worked on the 2012 Ford Focus battery electric vehicle, the 2012, the C-Max, 2013 C-Max plug-in hybrid vehicle. And then, as I mentioned in another answer, I worked on the Transit Connect, which will be coming out in maybe another year. The Transit Connect hybrid and battery electric vehicle for commercial vehicles. And with that, I actually, as part of the proof of concept, developed a fleet of vehicles and provided them to customers. I think it was JCI and FedEx, UPS, and there's about 10 companies, ThyssenKrupp, and so they each got 2 demonstrator vehicles that were built from the ground up. And then just recently, as part of LG Chem, so moving from Ford to LG Chem, I worked on the Ford. Actually, it was a Lincoln hybrid program, and then the plug-in hybrid FCA program. Yeah, over the course of my career, and I've been supervising for about 12 years now. I've supervised anywhere from like just one person all the way to 10 people. So for the amount of engineers, I have supervised 10. I currently have 7. And at LG Chem, it varies. Well, actually, it's primarily on the younger side. But at Ford, it was more diverse, and so there were some young folks as well as some veteran engineers who had over 30 years, and it required different types of supervisory tactics. With the senior DREs, required a little bit less supervision usually, and then for the younger ones, they required a bit more mentorship. So I would say 7 to 10 on average. I am most proficient in mechanical, but I do have quite a bit of experience with electrical in doing integration, particularly with high voltage battery packs, high voltage cables, lines, as well as the low voltage. So that electrical, the EEME, electrical mechanical, those always go hand in hand. I am a little bit I'm a little bit less familiar with software. As part of the battery pack at LG Chem, we do release the software version, which is tied to our battery pack end item part number. So we have to be cognizant of what is going on with that. At my time at Ford, I used to be in calibration, and so we would have cal files as well as strategy files. So in terms of the iteration for development, software churned quickly. Much quicker, especially when you go into production, it churns much more quickly than mechanical or an electrical. But it's still it's something that I'm not quite as familiar with, but it's still something that is attached to the end item in my current function. Yes, I have led multiple design reviews during my experience in engineering, both at Ford and then also at LG Chem, just to provide some sort of example. For a design review, for instance, at Ford, when we were developing the new fuel system architecture for plug-in hybrids, it was known as NIRCOS, non-integrated refueling canister only systems. and that is something that I would prepare the presentation, the slides for it, and then take, it was a tech club review, or the subject matter experts, the technical specialists, the chief engineer directors, and then up to a vice president. So I would do that to overcome and demonstrate, communicate what the hurdles were, and how we were overcoming those hurdles, what the status was, and then when the next milestones were, and what sort of support was required. I've also done this as a DRE, a design release engineer, and then also help to facilitate the dialogue with my current lead DRE for the FCA GSW pack, in which we do use check sheets, and we use like gate checklists to ensure that we are meeting all the deliverables for the design review. So I would run a design review very similar. Typically what I do is I have senior or lead DREs that I work with, and so I may have 3 DREs that I currently have. Those are the guys who maintain open issues docs, and then of those issues docs or tasks, each one is assigned a champion, and so that's where the other engineers would be, their name would be placed on there. And then I have due dates, I have progress dates, and then, how do we close this thing? And then what is expected? Kind of like an explanation or a history column. So that can be managed in Excel, and then it can also be embedded into like Microsoft Teams or Microsoft OneNote. And so I believe strongly in meeting minutes. I expect that of all of my senior DREs when they facilitate the discussions. Sometimes I work with engineering analysts if required, so that they can also help in facilitating discussions and ensuring that we have meeting minutes to make sure that we have a champion for every issue, when the next touch point is, and what the expectation is. And so I also do that with all my meetings as well. Yes, I do have multiple experiences with the number of programs that I've been on, going from prototype to production. I guess let me pick an idea. I'll pick one with the GSW program. That is a program where I took it over back in August timeframe. And so at the time we were building packs in Troy at the CMIT Tech Center. And so we would build like 5 or 6 of them, and some of the parts would be that they would be the suppliers would be local. But for production, it was a different story in ramping up, working with purchasing teams, and then also working with Korea, because all the production suppliers were in Korea. So it was quite an international affair to get those to get the suppliers on board, and to ensure that we had the proper ordering system, and that we had the proper project management to get parts to our assembly plant in Poland. So in terms of logistics, it was quite a bit to get that going. But now we are about to go into production, and we just got over our interim PPAP. So I do have a lot of experience going from prototype to production. I'll just add to that, as a fuel system engineer, we would build prototypes or like off of soft tools or low volume tools prior to M1 DJ or pencils down design freeze, and then we would ramp up and get ready to go as we got closer to launch. Roll up my sleeves and do what is required. Turning the wrench. Coming from LG Chem, I do wear a lot of hats, including defining a release process, or correcting a release process, setting an example for my lead DRE, or sometimes I'll put on a checker hat and check prints, because the first time through wasn't where it should be, and some of the DREs perhaps weren't doing what was required of them. And so then I became a checker. So in terms of doing tasks, in terms of getting my hands dirty or taking a canalizer and attaching that into the OBD2 port, taking data or doing a data acquisition on a canalizer or on a laptop or ATI, yeah, that doesn't bother me one bit. So especially with smaller companies, the expectation is that you wear a lot of hats. In terms of travel, yes, I can travel both domestically and internationally. I have a passport that is good through 2023, and I can fly, notwithstanding the COVID-19 situation once there's clarity with that. But we're all stuck under that. So, but yes, I can travel. I have a family of five. It's my wife and myself, and then we have three kids. I have a 14-year-old, 12-year-old, and a 5-year-old who's going to be turning 6 in a month. So there's quite a lot of activity and never a dull moment at home. We like to work out. We like to I enjoy watching stand-up comedy. I'm also a big Michael Jordan fan. I hope that doesn't lower my probability here. But I've been watching the Last Dance documentary, the Jordan documentary, shooting some hoops, trying to keep busy, trying to stay healthy. But yeah, we have I have a lovely family, and my kids are my hobbies and my interests.